Welcome to the Six-Figure Author Experiment, where we help you break through your first or next $100,000 goal. Parental discretion is advised. Now, let's get on with the show.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Lee. And this feels like a group chat because we have a little group chat going with like cool books. So, how are you guys doing?
Awesome.
Great to visit with you guys like this way and not on a chat. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So, for those of you listening, or for those who may not know Jennifer as much as Lee and I do, Jennifer, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about?
My name's Jennifer Hilt, and I'm the author of the Trope Thesaurus series. And my jam is basically talking about how tropes work in story and how different ways we can apply them to make our stories reach readers.
Awesome. Do you want to define what a trope is? And then Lee was just about to tell us some really cool information, and she's like, "We should do that on the podcast." So Jennifer, could you tell us what a trope is? Or
I like to think of a trope as a couple different things. First, it's something that's easily recognizable. When people hear it, they're like, "Oh, I know what that is." So like a bride or a billionaire or a loner or friends to enemies. Enemies to lovers, things like that are like really recognizable. I think also it's a thing that you can use as a story building block because of that. And the other thing is that I think it really is talking about relationships, and we can use that in our stories to like build what's happening with our characters. So I think of them as those things, but I don't think of it as a cliche, because I think of cliches as very fixed and hard to manipulate, because they already have an inherent value to them as like negative, like gold digger or dumb jock, things like that. So that's kind of how I separate those out when I'm working, and it just makes it easier to play with them and apply.
right. You said something interesting before I bounced it over to Lee, because you said friends to enemies and actually enemies to lovers. But like, it's a really interesting thing about tropes is they're genre dependent often, because like you will not find a lot of lovers to enemies in romance, but you find it all of the time in lit fiction, in fantasy, in sci-fi.
Mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. With mystery.
Yeah, which is so great because it's like the same thing. That's the part I love, that you just can play with them like that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Lee, do you want to tell us where romance is going with tropes? Or
Romance, we're talking about tropes and marketing specifically. And in romance right now, as part of your basic marketing package, you just get a trope card. You just get your couple or the book cover in the middle, and then just little arrows that are like forced proximity, or typically you try to use language that book talkers use or Instagrammers use. So only one bed, enemies to lovers for short, touch her and die, or he unalives someone or she unalives someone. And it's part of the marketing. You're just like, here it is. And obviously incorporating tropes into the blurb has always been a thing. And now romance is like, oh no, you want the laundry list. Does this contain coconut? Does this contain cinnamon? It's right here. Here's the list of ingredients. And I struggle with tropes because I'm always twisting them. And we had a whole talk on twisting tropes for your conference. And that's where I feel most comfortable. And oftentimes I will start writing a story and then I'll realize, oh, this is a Sleeping Beauty retelling or something after the fact, and then need to like pull that out for the marketing. So it helped me to realize that tropes are just shared language, and it is a laundry list. Like, if and people are already choosing. If they want to read a romance, they are opting for the romance, the happily ever after. They're just opting in for some things already, and this is just adding to that list.
yeah, I think that's really interesting, because tropes really do like if they're in a laundry list of ingredients, then like you're it's less I'm going to convince you to read this book, and more like, do you want a like roast beef sandwich? Because like these are the ingredients of, and I had these are how I make my roast beef sandwich. And like, if you're already looking for a sandwich, maybe you want this sandwich. But like, it's less like, I always feel like marketing, when people have problems with it, they have problems with like, I don't want to force somebody or trick somebody or convince somebody to like read my book. but like marketing really is about finding the person who already wants to read that book. And tropes are a way to call out to a person that says, oh, I like this, but I don't like horseradish, or I'm addicted to shellfish, or like, so like I'm not going to read this one. I think about like Lee, and we have our group chat. Like a lot of times I'll post a book and be like, but like there's a lot of unaliving in this book, Lee. You may not like this one.
Yeah, children. I want the list of content warnings. It's like if there are children in peril, you're not too happy with pets in peril, but definitely like children in peril, even romances. Like, oh, she gave up her baby for adoption and then she's sobbing, in this book, she meets him again and she's crying. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to read that one when I'm going to trip away from my kids,
Right.
So, yeah, I think that people resist tropes because your mind might not work that way. You're going into the story, and naturally, you probably are writing a hero, a strong hero, someone to follow through the course of the book. You're writing conflict. You're already using the building blocks of story, and then learning to talk to other people about your book. Tropes really, really help. But I am always surprised when I look down the list of things of tropes, and I'm going, wow, I didn't really set out to write an enemies to lovers or this sort of book. I just felt into the characters. So it just, I was reverse engineering it though, and it was fine. And you can twist tropes. So maybe that's just all you do.
You can do all those things, though, which is the great part about it, because people say, well, I want to use them, but I don't know how to use them. And I'm like, oh, well, tell me about your story. So they'll tell me about their story. And then like, oh, I can easily see like 5 things just from what they're telling me. But they hadn't been thinking of it like that because they're doing it intuitively, which is totally fine. It's just when it comes time to marketing, then and that's when it's really helpful to be like, oh, so yeah, actually you do have, this warrior hero, and you do have a quest going on, and you have like some other things, And so it's kind of like you can use it in different stages. It doesn't have to just be in the beginning when you're starting something, but definitely when you're getting ready to marketing is like the time to like, okay, what do I got?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's strongest. I mean, I have a book literally about baking marketing into your writing, and so does Monica. So like both of like us have different books about the same topic. So I think that it's like I think what I tell people also is like you're already writing tropes. It's like you're writing them. Like they're there. Like literally, if you just have like a character, like there's a warrior. Well, like that defines that warrior is either going to like be a hero, he's going to be an enemy, he's going to be like war torn, he's going to be reluctant, he's going to have like someone to rescue, like all of those things, like just that one thing. Like if you read a blurb, there are tropes. They exist. Like they are just things, as Lee said, that like give us the shared language to talk about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how can we do it better? Like what are people like you work with a lot of people with tropes, and we specifically reached out and you were like, what is the thing we want to talk about today? And I was like, man, like I talk to a lot of people who just like don't get it. They don't get the covers. They don't get the blurb. Yes, Lee.
Okay, so I've been doing some coaching lately. While resisting becoming a coach. I was like, no, maybe later. And then I'm like just coaching all my friends. So I was like, fine, we're doing a 7-figure author incubator. They're my guinea pigs. I'm just trying it. But I get to then openly coach people. And I met with someone yesterday. She's like, help me with my launch plan. And she used to run a copy editing firm. And I said, your launch plan is better than my launch plan at this point. You just need mindset stuff. And I've been reading about goals. When you set a big goal or you set any goal, your frame of reference shifts. I think that a lot of storytellers are really afraid of selling. We don't want to be salesy. So I want you to shift your mindset to embrace something. We all have likes and dislikes, right? We have things that we very passionately like and we very passionately dislike. And I think that when it comes to marketing your book, you want to actually portray both. You want to be like, if you like this sort of story, you're going to love this. If you hate enemies to lovers when they're not really like have knives at each other's throats, then, you know, you're going to love my book. So we all have likes and dislikes. So if you can get passionate about your cup of coffee in the morning because you just love caffeine, then bring that passion to your own book. And so I think it helps to be a little contrary and be like, I am gonna repel the wrong readers. I mean, I talk about my books being spicy. And someone recently returned a bundle of ours. She's like, I did not realize that they were that spicy. And I'm like, you know what? Here's your money back, because you can take that money and spend it on something that you would like. Our books are very spicy. I want people to know that, but they're exactly what we were craving. So we wrote them. And it's a selling point to say, this is something you will really like if you like it, and it's something you will hate if you don't like it. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so turn what Lee said into tropes.
Well, I think it's really neat because, well, so Lee's talking about being passionate, right? So you're like, and I think a lot of that also pairs with tropes in that you're trying to communicate your voice with your tropes, because everybody's always afraid, oh, if I use tropes, my story's going to sound like everybody else's story, but it won't, because you have your unique storytelling voice. And so that's what like the kind of magic is with like when you're doing these blurbs and showing, okay, yes, I'm using these tropes, but it has my way of doing it. And so I always talk about like Megan Quinn has like her blurbs does a really great job with that, because for romance, because she just totally lays out those tropes, but she does it in such a way that you hear those characters talking and you're like, oh, interesting, I want to know more. So so that's kind of like the important thing that we have to keep in mind, is like how our voice comes in with our tropes. So I also think that comes with bringing that passion. But the thing that I was interested to see what you guys thought was this idea of like stories have all, because people will say, oh, what are some tropes I should have in my stories? So you're going to think about like, are you using tropes for characters? Are you using tropes for conflict? There's like one way that I like to think about it. So when you and obviously that's going to translate to marketing, because then people want character driven stories, but they also like stuff have to happen. So those are like one way that we could kind of talk about it. And then you can like twist your blurbs in your marketing to like if you're a science fiction fantasy, you're going to like really have more action, right? Those are just generally story stuff's blowing up. You have really high stakes, and you have a lot of like the ticking time bomb trope in there. And I think that ticking time bomb is a trope that we see in a lot of stories, but there's some stories that it's more prominent. And like, if you guys go back to that ingredient thing, it has like a stronger flavor than maybe a romance that's going to like definitely have more like character stuff going on. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, though, you fixed my story, because you said you need a stronger goal motivation more than they're just like sort of in each other's proximity, and it was supposed to be it's kinky Batman, and I was like, that's enough. My imagination is rich with these characters, but it did need, for the story, it needed that, and I ended up adding a suspense trick to like pull the reader through, and people are saying it's the best thing that they've ever read by me, because it melded everything I loved,
right,
but with the pull through the story. So ticking time bomb, guys, like add it
high stakes. Yeah, high stakes,
higher stakes.
Yeah, and that's like, and you see that where it's like, okay, like this story, they're not going to be the same at the end. It's like, that's what high stakes is. It's really like life or death. And it can be like, emotional, like the wrecked if they can't be with the person, or it could be like, physical or spiritual or there's like all different ways to do it. But it does seem like if you can pinpoint in your story where you have really high stakes and convey that through the blurbs of like, oh, these things are going to happen and these risks, I think that's really huge. Yeah, I'm sure that's something to say about this.
Well, I love it because there's really two things. I mean, I know we're harping on blurbs here, but like, that's like 250 words that should take you 15 minutes to write, and it takes you like people like that. But like, I say,
just resist. Never write them.
I say this because if you know your tropes, a blurb is really like 3 staccato sentences that are like either tell you a trope / stake of the character or the world. And then it's setting up, if it's romance, where each character is, and then the stakes of their relationship. And like all of those things can be done through like just tropes. So for instance, like, and I think I love this idea of tropes as buckets because like there are character tropes that you need for marketing. Like this person is a hot mess heroine. This person is an alpha male. This person is like not necessarily like a job or anything. Just like this person has been wounded by love. This person is like second chance. This person just like signed their divorce papers. Like whatever the thing is, like all of those are like the character tropes. And then there's like stake tropes, right? Where it's like they have to like solve this problem by tomorrow. They have to like enter this contest so they don't lose their house. They have to find the murderer. They have to like do whatever the stake thing is. And then like there's like kind of setting tropes too, right? Where it's like, okay, is this fantasy world like cyberpunk? How do the monsters like relate to each other? Are the monsters like evil or good? Is this like does this character like antagonistic to the main are these two people antagonistic to each other? Like what are the stakes of like the setting? And when you're having a problem, oftentimes your brain is saying, I can't move forward, but I don't know why. So like I am stalled. And you can do a couple of like if you go back to like the tropes of either your genre or usually more likely it's like what Lee said. It's like, well, you probably are not just writing romance. You're probably writing romance, sci-fi, romance, like you're probably writing like a minimum of like one other kind of genre as well. Same thing with fantasy. And it's like, well, even if you are writing a like high fantasy book, it's probably like either a romance book, a suspense book, a thriller book, a mystery book, like, and so you're pulling elements from that, from like both of those things. So like, what is the secondary genre and what are the tropes from that you can use to like beef it up? Because often those like hooks or that like that like twist that Lee was talking about, it's so often like, well, the twist is I'm really writing a mystery novel. Like it's a romance, but like the twist is like it's a suspense novel. And like the twist is like the trope from this other thing that's like turning this on its axis. And so whether it's writing or marketing, really like I love your book because it's just like often a list of tropes. And I love your Substack because it's just like, here's what happens in the first 20 pages, and I'm just gonna like tell you all of the tropes. And there's like 30 tropes in this like first page, but like they're not all necessarily tropes of that genre. They're tropes of like that genre or the secondary, tertiary genre that all are kind of mishmashing together, which is really where like forests get their power, I think.
Yeah, and I think like for me, I view that tropes can be used across genres, but like you have to pay attention to the genre expectations. But like some people look at them a different way, and that's like totally fine. It's like whatever works for you. The bucket idea is the thing that I think is really helpful, and just of like, okay, you're working on something, you get stuck. Like, what can I rummage around in here, pull out that gives me some conflict, some oomph, gets me excited about moving forward? And that's what I think there's a lot that tropes can do for that.
Yeah, and there's evergreen tropes across like it's like a ticking time bomb will always work. It will literally 100% of the time, no matter what the story is, you might not be able to literally deliver a bomb, but like there is always a like pregnancy or a pregnancy scare or like a mortgage deadline or like all the murderers are going to leave the island or something. So you have like literally like it never doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. And I think when you pair that with forced proximity, you get like some really good stuff. I mean, there's like, you remember the cool, the Japanese guy wrote it, but it was like all the assassins were on the train.
Yeah. Bullet Train or Train to Busan.
Yeah. That was, I think it was the one. Yeah. I can't remember which. I read the book and then they made the movie, and anyway, but it's like, oh my gosh, that's like when we talk about high concept, like that's a great example, right? Because it's like you got all these murders and there was an object they all wanted on a train and they're all trying to kill each other to get it. The thing doesn't get off. It doesn't stop. It's one of those high. So it's like you have all those things on there. But not all our stories are going to be like that. We're not all writing those kind of like, high stakes, super high stakes thrillers, but everybody can have forced proximity of some sort in their story, and everybody can have like ticking time bombs. And when you put those together, people can't run away and things got to get fixed in a certain time. That's, I think, like really, really important to know for your story, but then, and then to translate that too for marketing. But that's how you get like people to keep turning pages, because they're like, it translates to, oh, what's going to happen next? How are they going to get out of this?
Right. Well, and it's like its own baked in, like one of the things that I think younger writers do is they like don't have a sense of time.
Mm-hmm.
And like those things immediately bring you a sense of time. Well, you're getting divorced, but both of you have to sell the house and figure out how to sell it, and you don't know what you're doing. Like, it's like, well, that's like a really light form of forced proximity. And that's like a whole nother way of like, you have to sell it in 3 months because like X, Y, and Z are happening, like there's all of these romances that are like sign the divorce paper so like I can like marry my next, that we just saw The Surfer, and that was like how that's set up.
Yeah, and so it's already inherent in there, and then you have these like two things that are like fighting each other, but that really propels the story. So then you can like dig into like what the emotion things are of the characters, because you have a plot structure that is gonna keep chugging along.
I like it. I am so glad that I sat down with you. I had worked with so many beta readers who were lovely, and you were the one who was like, oh, you need this. And I was able to add basically letters from a serial killer, but nobody knows if they're from the hero or not.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to find out. So they're like, is Batman the killer? And they zoom to the end. Even the editor was like, I just want to read ahead. I want to skip. I want to stop editing, which is a huge compliment. And I just wrote, add ticking time bomb to everything, because that's the other thing about tropes is you could just write one trope over and over that you're endlessly fascinated with. And I know that all of us have stories that we are endlessly fascinated with, because you wouldn't sit down for months, potentially years at a time, to play with one story if it wasn't rich enough of a vein for you to keep mining. So I've written maybe 3 or 4 retellings of Hades and Persephone and just thought up another one. Mm-hmm. And I just love the story. And so I think that we all have our story chops, and tropes can be great tools. And then when it comes to marketing, it's just a great shorthand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would love to get your opinion on this because, Jennifer, because I have for years said like there are tropes that are in every story in a series. Like, okay, this is a small town romance series. Like every single one of these things, there's going to be consistent tropes, right? This a mystery is, so there's like if you're Tana French, like all the books are gonna be like a mystery or like a thing, and like they're all going to thematically probably be like similarly like about like a corrupt person or the corruption inside of us, or like how we like deal with the morality inside of us. But like each book also has its like tropes that are different for each character. So like just because it's about Ireland and like murder, and like each of those characters deals with like morality and like corruption. They go about it in very, very different ways. So do you talk like how does that play in, or does it play in?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're totally throwing me a bone because you know how much I love to talk about Tana French. But I think, and specifically her stories, but I think this is you can extrapolate is really you're talking about like scars and secrets, and I think that that's a thing that we see like individually in stories, but then like people are asking me at TropeCon, and I was going to work on this, is like what are tropes that we see across series, and I feel like definitely scars and secrets are ones that we see like in individually, but then we stretch across series. And yes, I love Tana French and could talk about her all day long. But an example that maybe more people are familiar with is the Sookie Stackhouse series. And you guys have both read that, right? Or
Yeah.
you know enough, Russell?
Blood.
Yeah, I've read some of them, not all of them.
Well, one thing that I think is really important is that main character, Sookie, like of course she's got all this, great stuff going on with these hot vampires and things, but the thing is also, what is her identity? She has this major identity quest because she has ability to read people's minds, but they don't know what that is. And so throughout the whole story, it becomes this unraveling of like, oh, so actually she's part Fae and she has this whole other thing they didn't know about. But Charlene Harris teases that out through the stories. And I think that that's like a thing that we see, especially through series, is like this coming to identity. You see the same thing with Harry Potter. And then another series, it's older, but I think it has aged really well, is Sue Grafton's mystery series. And also coincidentally enough, all three of these characters are orphans. And so, in different stages, obviously, he's a kid and these are, grown women, one's younger, one's middle-aged, but it's like they're still wrestling with, okay, the orphan trope. And then like this, who is my identity? Who are my people? Where do I come from? Like, so you see that stretch. So those are things that I think that basically identity stretched through series is kind of like a whole other thing I've been thinking about lately.
Well, there are series that like the identity, like they'll be like, okay, I moved from orphan to like Hunger Games winner.
Right.
And then, and like the identity shifts now. Now I am Hunger Games winner, but like the next book is about identity, but like this moving from like Hunger Games winner to like icon of like Mockingjay. And then book 3 is about like how do you deal with the repercussions of fame and like all of the things that you did building this identity like to the end. And so like even when a character's identity does change quite dramatically, the theme of identity like stays consistent throughout.
Right. And we're getting to see that's like such an important, for example, Longmire, that it was a TV series and a book series. And, yes, it was a mystery series, but also you're like, trying to figure out what the heck happened to his, like this, there's like this identity backstory of what happened to his wife. And the reason I was watching it wasn't for Murder Every Week. It was because he's hot. And I'd like to see if he's going to wind up with his deputy. That's why I watched it for 4 seasons,
Yeah. Always out of romance, y'all.
Yeah.
Like, there are some of us who are just like, yeah, they're going to steal the Eiffel Tower MacGuffin.
Right.
But when do they kiss?
Right.
Glued to their seats for 700 books or 700 pages or like 7 seasons. Absolutely.
Yeah. Sarah Rosette, the mystery writer, and she's a really great person. She and I were talking and she was saying, she writes, these cozy mysteries, and what she gets emails about in the fan letters are not about the mystery. They want to know, when are they going to kiss? Like, when are they going to get together? Like, so that's just like, and that's her, B storyline or subplots of her characters. So, so it's just neat to like, there's still those evolving identities of the characters are what pull through the stories.
Yeah, and like the tropes of the romance like still carry through in the romance of these books, even if they are throughout like slow burn romance across many books. And like that, I think is really interesting because if like you have a subplot, you might be like, what is the subplot? It's always pretty good to like layer a thriller, mystery, or romance subplot or all of them like together because like they are going to get more if your king gets murdered and like there's like a hot guy and girl solving the case, like it's just going to attract the most amount of people without like, and what I like about tropes so much is you can be like, which of these can I add without compromising the integrity of the book? Like, because there are all of these tropes, like I talk about like cozy mystery, paranormal mystery. It's like, well, do you have to make like your person a like sewage person? Can they just be a baker? Because like it's going to be like you're going to get more people. Like if the structural integrity of the book is damaged, then like don't make them a baker or own a coffee shop or like any sort of cook, but preferably baker. Like you like can they have like a pet, like a cute pet that like is integral to the story? Like there's just like these things that can they have a romance with like the hot sheriff? I don't like, or like, well, it's almost always the hot sheriff, but but whatever that thing is, it's like, can you add this without, because like there's this list of things of like each trope that's like the top 10 evergreen things. And you're like, if you just like take your really weird book and you just like make it a small town romance also, like it's just going to like attract more humans to it. But if you cannot do that, you shouldn't. But there are just so many tropes, and like your books are just like trope after trope after trope, and then it's like another book that's just like the tropes of that genre that you can like add and play with endlessly and like make something unique while still calling out to the most number of people. And that's like the holy grail of marketing, right? It's like, well, how do I make my very weird thing true to the thing that I make, but also make $1 billion?
And that's the constraint. And again, your goal is going to change your frame of reference. I don't come naturally to tropes. It's so fascinating for me to read Jennifer's articles, like on the John Wick series. And because I don't watch the movie thinking, oh, that's a trope, that's a trope, that's a trope. I don't approach stories that way. There's too much going on. I'm distracted and I'm not thinking about the foundation. I'm thinking about like the pretty flowers. I don't know. But I think that people resist doing things that maybe they even want to do and that are more saleable because they think that writing, high level fiction or whatever, the next great American novel means it has to be totally unique, totally wonderful. And it just gets into weird territory.
Right.
And Jennifer Lynn Barnes talks about, we all have an id list of things we love. Because of course, when I write a heroine, she's going to make cupcakes or be a private investigator or both, ideally both. And it's because, oh my gosh, so my dream jobs are not really, I want to sit on the couch, but like I want to step into this world where I would do that sort of thing. And that's fun. But we think, and maybe you went and got a literary degree like me, which was a mistake. And your professors are like, oh, you're supposed to be writing this high grand stuff. And you take the things you love and you're like, well, that's not that. And Dr. Barnes is like, no, write your id list into it, because maybe she does have purple eyes and her hair is always floaty like Sailor Moon, but you're going to be so much more excited to write that. And the readers are going to be so much more excited to read that. And again, it's about loving your books and infusing them with what you love. But I think that people are resistant to this because they think I need to be a great writer. And that means very esoteric and very unique and original in every way, versus I want to write an amazing story that people want to read. And I think you just shift that goal frame, and then it's okay to incorporate things you love. Why are you writing? Like, incorporate the things you love. Let's do it. Let's all agree to do it.
I think when people, especially newer writers, they're really wanting to like, oh, I want to write something totally new and, exciting and doing all those things. But when you actually go to read those things, it's exhausting, because if every you're going like trying to go sentence to sentence, figuring out what's happening, because there's so much going on and they're not giving you any like you call signposts or road, guideposts or anything to go by, that makes you put the book down. But if you have something you're like, oh, okay, this is like a little toehold, something a little I can grab onto at the story. Let me follow this further to see what happens next. And I think the first season of The Witcher did a great job of that, because They played with time with it, but you were, at the end of it, I was like, I wasn't exactly sure what happened, but I certainly wanted to know more and watch the second season by doing that because I was so enthralled with these characters. So I think that's kind of like an important thing. It took me a long time to realize that. And one of the people who I talk about that helped me realize that was David Sedaris, the essayist, because I loved his work, but I'm like, wait, but he's using this, like, the language is very familiar, but yet he's like, pulling me in with these new, so it's like the combination of the familiar ideas and like his use of language. And I think he's like a great person with tropes to get, if you're just kind of starting out and you like humor and stuff, to look at his stuff, because it's like packed with tropes, but as only David Sedaris can do. You read it and you're like, I never thought of it that way, and it's just very engaging. And anyway, huge fan.
And it's your perspective is what makes it unique.
Yeah. Right.
And what you're bringing to it, like someone said, oh, so many people have written romances. But I said to them, and I'm glad I was proud enough to say this, I was like, I haven't written mine. I haven't written them. They're mine. And in my 7-figure author course, I do talk about that concept of tropes plus voice. Because your voice is going to take the readers where they want to go. But I love that idea of the toehold. Like they have something to hang on to. They have something that feels familiar. And they talk about in Hollywood, the executive producers are like, give me the same but different.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Right.
Well, the same would be these foundational story blocks that we all recognize on a deep level, the chosen one, whatever's your favorite. And then the different is going to be the way you tell the story, your voice. And I think it's actually a self-esteem thing. Like, feel proud enough of your own voice that you have. You could take any old tired trope and make it completely unique. Like John Wick. But I love John Wick. And I did not think, oh my gosh, look at all these tropes. I was just really invested in the story. So
it's so well done for so many reasons. And I just throw a plug in there. One of the reasons why I think it's so great, there are many, is the antagonist. The fact that he had a relationship with the guy before and he knew all his secrets and he did this impossible thing for him, and they each knew each other's like weak spots and were going against each other. I just think that like it's a really great example of creating a super strong antagonist.
Friends to enemies, we talked about it before. Like,
yes.
But so I say something that's one of my more controversial takes is that like the only way that someone can be comfortable, like actually investing in your story, is if they know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. They know like what rails you're going to be on. Like structure creates, like giving something structure and tropes gives you the chance to fuck around and find out way more. Like all of my books, except with the exception of like 2, are noble bright books, which means like the people are going to win in the end. Maybe not all of them, but like the bad guy's going to the bad guy will like not be, will either be unalive or in some way out of power. Like there will, like if there's a romance, most of my characters are like, the new one I'm writing is like we're now 500,000 words in, but like they started like basically right in the beginning, like having a romance in the last series, the one that comes out later, the Obsidian Spindle Saga. The secondary thing was a romance, and the rule was like they always make it back to each other. Mm-hmm. Like if they like so yeah, it's like you will, like these two, everyone else might die, but like these two people will not die. Like they are not going to cheat on each other. Like they are like in love. It is a true love subplot that like goes through. And like once you're like, oh, okay, people are going to survive. Like the bad guy's going to die. Like now I'm willing to accept almost any level of peril, anything that you do to that. And I think that's one of the things about, like, I know we talked about mafia romance stuff, but like one of the reasons why, like, I think you can get away with like doing like 365 days is like, you know, they're going to be in love at the end. Like there's a love story at the end of it. Like I don't know how these two people are going to go from like torture to being in love, but by the end they will be happy.
It's a roller coaster. It's entertainment. We're not going to get on a roller coaster if we don't know we're going to not make it off.
Yeah.
We're alive. And I think that before people invest their time, they want to, like you said, they want that certainty, and then you can take them on the journey with the ups and downs. My favorite roller coaster has you plummet down like 405 degree. I don't know. You go down for a long time. Anyway, but it's like the best. But I survived every time. So it's this danger, but packaged in safety. And yeah, I love Mafia. A reader reached out and said, the Mafia was big in my town. Why do you write this? Because real life, romance is not real life. It's
Right.
But I said, well, it's this, you can delve into the darkness safely. You can have all the thrill of the danger and that drop in the roller coaster, but you're completely safe.
Right. Yeah. It's like if you write a slasher book, there will be a final girl who survives at the end. Like there's going to be one. Like you have to have one. If you don't have one, you have broken the compact, and you should not make that promise at the beginning. But like, I actually think books without structure like that have to be boring. Like there has to be very little, like ordinary people, very little happens in that book. But like it's okay that very little happens, because it's not trying to like send you into other dimensions and like fall in love with like a mafia like it's not trying to like get you out of your like bubble. It's trying to like tell a very small story. But if you want to tell a big story, like you have to give it pretty hefty guardrails. Like in the Hunger Games, after she survives the first one, she's going to survive the second one, because like there's going to be a third one. And like look what they did with 4. With book 4, they did one with someone who you knew survived. Like with 5, Hamish is the winner of the Hunger, and like you can't do a Hunger Games book and go to all of the fucked up places that the Hunger Games goes if you don't know on some level, even if it's not made clear that like this person is going to like be positively be changed for the experience. Maybe not positively, but like they will survive. Maybe not in the way that they want to, maybe not in a way that doesn't leave them changed. Maybe they're horribly scarred at the end of this, like all of the Hunger Games people. But like you have the bigger leaps you need people to take, the more trust you need to have in something. Like all of the Gods vs. Chronicles books are built on an action adventure like Doc Samson thing. So it's like, okay, like we're going to have an action adventure novel. So like, there's going to be a bunch of different villains that like have increased. There's going to be like misdirections. They're going to think they got the thing they need, but they're going to be like stolen from that. Like there's all of these things that you can just say. And I know like this goes from like tropes to like structure, but like structure is just like a list of tropes. It's like structure tropes. And they're like, well, if you want to make something really original, like you can just say, oh, you know what I haven't seen in a while? Hitman. Like you guys both saw Hitman, right? Like yeah. Hitman, the Netflix movie where and everyone is like, hey, like everyone is very opposed to this one. And I'm like, well, did you know it was a romance? Because like the minute that you see that it's a romance thing, like you can't expect, you have to know they're going to survive it. They're going to be in love at the end. Like it makes a whole bunch of other expectations that like these things can't happen. Like the main characters can't get unalived. Like probably no one's going to get unalived until the very end. Like you can't watch this person like murder people on a Netflix. And like in the same way, like in a mafia book, when like the person's doing all of the horrible things and the girl thinks that like he is going to murder her. So you have to be like, that's not going to happen though, because like he loves you. All of the not 1 ounce of this book shows that he loves you, but like I know it's a romance, so like that has to be true. So I can like just be like, Lee, I trust you. I trust you, Lee, but like, man, you're making it hard to trust you. And then like when it all snaps together at the end, you're like, oh. Okay, this all made sense now, right?
It does. And I read that studies show that symptoms of fear, the heart pounding, sweaty palms, can be misattributed to arousal. So we're playing with that in the safety of your own home and, from your couch. And that's why I love the unalivers.
I just wanted to say Russell's mention of ordinary people got me thinking, because I hadn't thought about that story in a long time. But I would almost think that now you could classify that as a domestic thriller, because it's like an implosion of this family, right? And there isn't a lot of big action like we think, but it does deal with suicide, and it does deal with death, because one of the kids dies, and then just kind of how that story unravels and the characters kind of turn on each other or make alliances. And so that's just really, I'd never thought about that story in that way. So that's just really interesting for me to think about that. And just, of course, scars and secrets are like huge, but it's like a small story that makes a big impact with this small cast. And I always love stories that are like that, that are very tight. You guys know how much I love Sundial, Catriona Ward's story, and it's kind of similar to that. So
I was just thinking it was the White Lotus story, but as soon as you said a kid dies, I was like, oh, that's why I haven't read it.
Yeah. No, it's and it was at a time that there weren't stories like that. Now there's like really a whole genre of these, of kind of women's fiction or domestic thriller, depending on how it's skewed. But at the time, it's still relevant.
Well, it's like, it's a 1 week. Every White Lotus thing, happens over 1 week. And they are in force proximity, and roughly every episode is going to equate to a day, and pretty much no one will die until the last episode. And so because they have to, this has to be the moment, when this thing happens, it's everything was normal until that moment. So you then get to see, and I watch all the White Lotus seasons. I hate them. As a person who makes my thing, I am so against these watching rich people do rich people shit and being spoiled that Monica probably loves White Lotus because she's all about princess problems. And my thing is the only good princess problem is when they got their head chopped off by guillotine. And so but I know going in every time they're is this person? And you're like, nope, he doesn't die. He can't die. It's only day 2. Yeah. The thing the premise can't be completed until the last day. So all of the crazy ass shit that happens until the last episode, is all of this building tension. But they do it so well. But they do it so well because of all of those constraints. If you just went in and were like, well, people could die whenever, you'd be like, well, can I just watch these people enjoy their vacation? Can I be voyeuristic? Are these people going to die now? And the more seasons that go on that follow the same format of you're going to be in a beautiful place. Everyone's going to be terrible, but terrible in different ways. They're all going to have family drama, and they're all going to be super opulent, and it's going to be upstairs, downstairs, and it's going to they have this list of things that's the White Lotus tropes, but they are always the reason they can do all of those things and just let you go on all of these adventures is someone's going to die.
Yeah. And you get to imagine who it's going to be and how. So there's a lot of speculation. That's fun. And then the dialogue is really well written. The subtext is incredible. So I'm tuned in a way that I'm not with others.
Well, and also they show you just enough of the dead body that you're oh, there's guns. Where's the gun? There's the gun. That's a gun. It's got to be, has to be a thing. And that's her hair is blonde. So look, there's a blonde, you're spending all of this time guessing, and you're spending all of this time, which would be otherwise a pretty boring vacation show. I would watch it still, but it takes all of, and I guess that's where I want to, as we're reaching the end of it, that ordinary people thing is if you took ordinary people, you could, not that you should, but if you were why isn't my book selling? Or how can I make my book sell better? It's well, currently you've got a bunch of people in a beach resort. That's lovely. you got you don't really have a lot of romance. Can you add a romance subplot? So the last season had like those two, like the every season really has like one or two romance subplots, right? So it's like you have the girl who I'm not going to spoil. I can't spoil it, but like you have romance subplots. You know there's going to be a murder or like someone's going to end up dead. So like there's like a mystery subplot. There's like a ticking time bomb. There's forced proximity. Like there are all of these people who are very different, all clashing together in different like upstairs, downstairs. So it's like and you could add all of those things, like barely changing the plot. Like, if you just have a book that's set on a beach, you could just be like, I'm going to add a chapter of murder at the end and intrigue. They're all going to be, instead of being at 4 resorts, they're going to be at 1 resort. Like, instead of only showing the rich, I'm going to show the lives of like the people who work there too. And like with very little work, you can go from like what is essentially like an ordinary people style. Not that there's anything wrong with ordinary people, just like a book where not a lot's happening and you are like, well, I don't know, do I even have tropes in here? To being like, oh, what if it's a domestic thriller for real though?
I think the big thing that we hadn't mentioned, but people should be aware of to think about trope-wise is misdirection, red herrings, because they play such a huge role in all the things that Russell was talking about. That's what you would label those, where you're like, oh, I saw blonde hair. It's got to be blonde hair. Or, you know, the knife or whatever. And it's a form of conflict, but it's also a thing that keeps our pages turning. And I think once you kind of get clued into it, when you're watching things and reading things, you kind of start to figure out ways to incorporate it in your own work in your own way. But it's super important in terms of generating conflict. So, yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that? I know you like these kind of shows, so like I want to make sure we all have a chance to talk about the things.
No, I was just going to say, you know, moral of the story is get Jennifer's books, get the conference when you can, because I'm sitting here actually thinking about things to add to the end of Pinky Batman book 2, the final, because we talked about identity and justice, and talking about this stuff is really fun for me. Even though I don't approach story this way, it's like another way of coming at it. And it especially works like I'm at the end of the book. So I've already felt into the story. Now I need to fix it.
Right.
So grab the thesaurus. If you're like me, like get a foothold into the story yourself and move through. And then, you know, when you're like, there's something not quite right, grab the thesaurus, the Trope Thesaurus, and see what you could add, see what you could layer in. If you're not sure what your character's backstory is, like we use your book all the time. I have friends who plot this way. I prefer to do it a different way. Although it would be fun to really try to let myself go and see if I could be like all the building block tropes from Fourth Wing, but with my voice or something, which it would be Persephone and Hades retold. Just put that out there. But like in the school with the stakes, with the deaths, everything. And then like the final bosses like leveling up in the war. But anyway, I just think it's such a useful tool. I think people resist it because their identity needs to shift to, you know, I just was at the doctor's office and he said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a writer. And he goes, oh, you make a living at that? Like my impression was you don't. And I was like, yeah, I do. And I'm indie. And I talked to him, explained what that was, just cutting out the middleman, basically. And I think that a lot of us are socialized to think, oh, if I'm going to be creative, I'm not going to make any money. And it's just lies. So shift your frame of, you know, reference and, you know, keep listening to the podcast because I'm going to talk more about mindset, I think, in the future. And be like, I want to sell 100 million books because your storytelling will up level if you have that frame of reference. And I think that that's what we're meant to do. Tell the best stories we possibly can and have a blast doing it.
Yes. So I have a book called How to Write Irresistible Books That Readers Devour. I can't believe that I made it that long because I forget it every single time that I made it. But like
what is it called again?
The general thesis is the easiest way to never have to do marketing is to bake the marketing into the book so that it sells itself. And like there is a chapter on universal fantasies and enneagrams, and there's a chapter on tropes where I like name drop Jennifer very hard in that chapter. But like the more you can just say, okay, I want the book to sell. Like, I want people to read it. And instead of having to go back and like picking the tropes out, being like, okay, I love the chosen one. So like all of my books will have some sort of chosen one, but like I'm gonna flip it. So like then it's like, well, these are my id things. Like, what is the antagonist? Like, what is the polar opposite trope? Like, what is the polar op? What is the thing that this person would like least then? Or like, up, here's the trope. So how can I take someone who will hate it the most and put them in that situation? Like, oh, I don't want to, they're right. Who's the worst second chance love people? Well, like two people that really hate each other and had a contentious divorce. And like, I think War of the Roses is coming out again called The Roses. And you're just like watching, you're like, well, yeah, two people who hate each other are getting a divorce and are fighting over the house that they both love, one of which who's built is like the most contentious way to have a forced proximity, second chance love, whatever the thing is. And so like when you do that list of like ids, you can just say, all right, well, like, these are the things I like. Who would be the worst chosen one in the whole world? Like, who would be the worst, like hero? Like, who would be the hardest who would solve this mystery? And I think this is what Tana French does a lot. She's like, oh, this is my mystery. Who would be the worst human being to solve this problem? And then they make that person. But like by knowing what the trope is and knowing what the thing is to solve, you can then like incept in like how to make it even more powerful. So I like to I think of tropes obviously as the marketing thing, but really it's like if you use these things and bake them into the story, then like the story gets better and people want to read through it faster. Like if you add a ticking time bomb, then people will read until the end of that ticking time bomb. And if the ticking time is at the end of your book, they will read to the end of your book. Even if they don't like the book, frankly, they will read to the end just because they have to know like what happened. So I think we should give Jennifer the last word. I want you to definitely talk about Trope Thesaurus because I don't think we actually talked about Trope Thesaurus this whole time. And Trope Talk, which I think is just jenniferhilt.substack.com.
Yep. I have a Substack that I talk about, as Russell said, and what I like to do is take a book or movie and like break it down. Like these are all the tropes in it, and then talk about like kind of which ones are pulled out more and how they're used and how that works with like genre. And the books, the Trope Thesaurus is my first book, and I talk about romance and mystery and sci-fi and fantasy in there. I'm sorry. And that's really like my idea of how I use goal, motivation, and conflict with tropes to kind of create a framework. And so that's kind of like the first book I did. And then I've created other books after that, horror, romance, and sci-fi and fantasy. And those are really like going and breaking down further and with different examples of like how the tropes work, what are the emotions that are pulled out, how we can like see them and replicate that kind of urgency in our own work. So, and I'm working on the mystery thriller one right now.
Okay. That was my literally question was like, when's the mystery thriller one coming out though, Jennifer?
Yes, I'm working on that one right now. So probably later this year or early next year. I haven't decided if it's going to make it before the end of the year or not.
If you're stuck, grab a thesaurus. If you're in a creative rut, grab a thesaurus and figure out what you love, what stories you love, typically like what stories you love to read. Just go in and highlight some of those. And then you'll probably wake up the next morning with an idea for a full series.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that's really cool about the book is you talk about a lot of the tropes, but then you will like show you like do an example that's like this. And so if you're like, well, how does this actually work in practice though? Like she has like a theory chapter and it's almost always followed, if not always followed by like this is how it actually looks with like an example from that genre. And I think that like the first book is like essential because like it just talks about all of these like main overarching tropes. But then when you're like, well, cool, you did fantasy, but like, what about urban fantasy, epic fantasy, portal fantasy, da 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 da? And I know like writers want their own exact use case. So like you can then say, okay, I get how this works in romance, but like how does it work in small town romance by like getting the book? Or like if you're stuck in your mystery and thriller, like maybe you pick up the romance book and be like, let's add some tropes in one of these things.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, just keep working. Don't give up. That's
Awesome.
the biggest thing.
I love it. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you
so much for having me, guys.
Thanks for listening. For more, head on over to sixfigureauthorexperiment.com for archive access, resources, and more. We'll see you next time.